we're all on the Zoom at the same time. It's a little early in the morning here in LA, another beautiful day in LA. And Nicole Sierra Rollet is joining us. I believe you're in London, right, at the moment? Is
Yes,
that
sir.
okay? Is that okay to say? And you've got some things happening. You're looking beautiful today. Always sporting that fantastic Shen Blue chic. I love
Always bleu, something bleu
that.
every day, trying to turn the world bleu one day at a time.
I loved your tagline from think tanks to wine tanks. Nicole has been in the business of publications, banking, and think tanks, working with the Rockefeller Foundation and various other organizations. Graduate of Vassar College, um, definitely involved in all things finance, and has led an amazing life working in the wine world now, with her own estate, taking it from being an abandoned property into one of the leading wine producers in the Southern Rhone, and also now achieving biodynamic certification. And Shen Blue is really building a reputation and a quality mark, represented by Wilson Daniels worldwide, and also visited us recently. So these ladies work really hard, have had amazing academic backgrounds, and are now leading their wine families to get the name out. And we're so pleased to have both of you here at the same time. It's such a privilege for me to be able to speak with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Being
Ian.
your rock star, and I have to say that I've traveled the wine world north, south, east, west, upside down, backwards at this point. And I'm so excited to be on this call with two of my favorite people that I've met on the whole wine planet. And what a great idea to pose together. But of course, Laura and her company, her achievements are a huge role model to me in every way, because when I started in the wine world, I didn't really have people that I knew had backgrounds that in some way resembled mine, or at least that I would aspire to resembling. And what she and her family have done is so remarkable. And I've been lucky with my family. They've been incredible. My husband and his family have been incredible, and I would never want to take credit. I never wanted to take credit away from my husband and my family and my team, because they're really incredible. But I have to say that it's just so exciting to meet people that I have so much appreciation and respect for. And it's been a really helpful inspiration to me. Thank you.
Laura, why don't we start with your wine and talk about your Catena Zapata, and just give us a little background on the property. Let me show you the Zoom slides that we have at the same time.
Okay.
And this is the wine that we're going to taste here. It's called White Clay, and it's a Semillon and Chenin blend from Lohan de Coyo. Did I pronounce that correct?
Yeah, very good.
Or,
Luján de Cuyo. Yes.
all right. And 2020 vintage, 92 points, James Suckling. I love this wine. I have a lot of fans in our business that love Chenin wines, and blending it with Semillon is such a unique thing. We'll cover that in a second.
Yeah.
Let's talk about your property.
Yeah. So our family winery was founded by my great grandfather, Nicola Catena, who came from Le Marche in Italy in 1898 and planted his first vines of Malbec in 1902. And, until recently, most people in the world had not heard of Argentine wine because we were drinking it all ourselves. We had this, really large Spanish and Italian immigration to Argentina in the 19th century and early 20th century. So there was this huge market for wine because all these immigrants, they drank wine, lunch and dinner every day. And so this really elevated the industry, although we have been making wine in Argentina since the 16th century. So, when you say New World, it's really, there's so much history in Argentina. And then, my great grandfather came with this wave of immigrants, and he came specifically to make wine. And he came, from Italy in a time when there was a lot of poverty and not a lot of food. And he actually used to have a piece of steak for breakfast every morning to celebrate this country he'd come to that had so much open land and so much opportunity. And he also thought that Argentina was the best place to make wine in the world. And that's because we have this amazing combination of the mountain climate with the sunlight, the cool climate, and the well-drained soils, and not a lot of rain. So it's very easy to farm, organically and naturally. So this is our pyramid winery, which is the shape of the winery is a pyramid because we didn't want to copy anything European. We wanted to celebrate something more American. We are also American in South America. People often forget that. And, the Mayans were the most civilized, they were the people, the native peoples of the Americas that had the most sophisticated language. They understood math really well, farming, the stars. And so in inspiration in this Mayan architecture, we created this pyramid. And do you want me to talk a little bit, Ian, about the wine?
Sure, let's go for it.
So the family starts with my great grandfather. My grandfather was this incredible blender. And this is my father, who was basically the person who put Argentina in the world map of wine, because he actually was inspired by California. We left Argentina in the early 80s when there was a military government, and it was kind of a crazy time. My uncle had been kidnapped. There were bombs everywhere. It was quite dangerous. So my father said, we're going to go visit my friend Carlos Benito in Berkeley. And he managed to get this visiting scholar position. And when he was there, he was visiting the Napa Valley, and he saw that the Californians were saying, we're going to challenge the French for the top, wines of the world position. And my father said, well, if the Californians think they can challenge the French, why not me in Argentina? So he went back and started this whole revolution for quality. And then I showed up mostly trying to help my father because I was going to be a doctor full time. And I have a big connection to Los Angeles because I did my residency at Harvard UCLA, which is a great place to study emergency medicine. And I worked at Santa Monica Hospital for a while. But anyhow, I'm continuing my father's journey. And this wine, though, to go maybe show back the slide about the wine. So this is a really fun project because we make really highly rated Chardonnay, and you probably know Malbec from our family and from Argentina, and we also make some blends with Cabernet Sauvignon. But the way this wine came about was that I kept on getting asked, so what other white wine do you have from Argentina that's delicious? And I said, well, what we drink at home is Semillon mixed with Chenin, and this is something that just happened because there was a lot of Chenin planted to make vermouth and other sort of spirits. And so there's tons of Chenin planted in Argentina. And then also Semillon came at the same time as Malbec. And so they were planting Semillon as a high quality white varietal because it was so famous in Bordeaux. And then Argentines saw that the two varieties worked very well, and they work really well in the clay soils of Agrelo. For some reason, clay is very good for both Semillon and Chenin. So, one time when somebody was asking me that and they came to Argentina, I was like, well, this is what we drink here at home, but we don't export it because we're like, who's going to drink Semillon Chenin from Argentina? And so like this friend of mine tasted it and they said, oh my God, this is like one of the best, most refreshing white wines I've ever had. And so we said, okay, let's sell it. And then, it came to the name. And so we have these two Chardonnays that are like kind of like very world famous. They've gotten 100 points and all that. They're called White Stones and White Bones. And so the soils in this region are clay. So I was like, okay, white clay. And that's how the white came about. And there's something really cool about the label. If you could do a close up, maybe put it on the camera, is that because in the clay soils, you have much more microbial activity and fertility. We actually put little worms in the soil. You can see them on, yeah. So if you really look carefully at the label, you see the stones, you see the clay, and then you see all the little worms that go through the soil and that, create, that add nitrogen and that aerate the soil because you don't want the soil to be all compacted. And so I wanted to kind of honor these little microbes that are more present in clay soils and in sandy soils. And so that's why it's part of, this is our only label that has little insects on the label.
I wouldn't have known that unless you told me that those were worms. But I do see
Yeah.
like a little, I don't know, it looks like a lobster down there too.
Yeah.
Um, well, it's beautiful wine, start with, and then you get into the fact that it's from specific soils and it's a, a family find. This is something that's not typical to Argentina, so it's something very very special and very personal to you and your family.
Well, I wouldn't say, the thing is, it is a wine that we drink at home,
Yeah.
but it's not typically exported.
Hmm.
So what, these two varieties have a big history in Argentina, over 100 years that they've been planted. There's some very old vines. One big issue though is that because it's not being exported and a lot of people want to make wine for export, these vines are being pulled out. So Ian, you could change that for us. If you and your customers start drinking Semillon Chenin from Argentina, like literally we will save vineyards. This is something, I mean, Nicole can talk about this as well. Like, you guys have wine consumers have no idea of their power. If you guys start drinking some of these rarer grapes, we are able to keep those vineyards and plant more of them. If nobody is interested or buys the wine, eventually, you have to pay salaries and, do things, and you're not going to keep on making those wines. So we need people to like the slightly more exotic things.
Yeah. And there's so many food implications for this wine, and it
So
just
many, yeah.
it's perfect for the summer. It
Yeah.
almost has a little salinity.
Yeah. So
And
so the way I describe it is, it's got, the aromatics are not particularly strong because Chenin is it's not, super high on the aromatics. So it's got a little bit of like, this kind of mineral, mildly floral, but not too much. To me, this wine is all about, freshness and a little creaminess on the palate from the Semillon. So it's that really refreshing kind of wine that you can pair with so many foods. And I think that some of the qualities are almost rosé-like in the sense that rosé is also a wine that's not so aromatic, but a lot of it is about the palate, as opposed to a Chardonnay that is, there's so much about the aromas. And so I think there are some parallels about when you might drink the white clay and when you might drink a rosé.
well, I think they're both perfect summer wines, and
Yeah.
they go with anything, off the grill, grilled fish, vegetarian cuisine, Mediterranean cuisine, salads, summer vegetable garden type of items.
Yeah.
Just really optimal for this wine. And I knew we were going to be doing this at the end of July, so this was just a wine of the moment type of a situation, and it's beautiful. And
You're making me hungry and thirsty. It's almost that time here.
yeah. Do you guys export it to France or
The
London?
white clay,
Yeah.
I don't think we do have an importer in France that actually sells quite a bit of wine. Honestly, I don't know. I do know we sell quite a bit of it in UK.
There you go. I would think so. Well, it's an amazing place, and in fact, we do quite a bit of travel around here to kind of take our small customer group on a really interesting trip, and we're going to come to Argentina next year, so we'll have to talk about how we can come visit the property. We're going to do that in October of 23, and so we're going to have some fun in Mendoza. We're going to head up to Salta and then down to Patagonia too. So it's going to be quite a journey. But the property is, internationally renowned. And here's a good look at your White Stones vineyard.
Yeah, that's right. That we were talking about. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's our winemaker who we co-wrote this book that you were showing, the Malbec Mon Amour, which you guys, this was reviewed by the New York Times, and it was a bestseller in Argentina. The first time that a wine book was a bestseller, and it's got tons of really fun illustrations. So let me see, I'll open in a random, well, this one is like more of a, like the soil. But basically, it's got a lot of really fun content about wine history, but also a lot of more like geeky things about flavor and geology. But anyhow, I think you will have a great time coming to Argentina, especially if you come with Ian, because he's fun. And Nicole should come too.
Oh, don't say it twice. I used to go there all the time in my former life because I was at the Council of the Americas, and I was on an airplane to South America pretty much every week.
Oh,
and it
wow.
was just great. Had lots and lots of fun in Argentina. In fact, it's one of my favorite countries. Although my family also lived in Brazil, so a little bit of rivalry there, you know, the old tango versus whatever, lambada in my case. I actually single-handedly brought lambada to the US a million years ago with this little cassette that I had made on a beach one day when I was on holiday there. I heard this really great music and this great dance I'd never seen before. It's like, oh, I have to bring that home to America. And it was so much fun. We all learned to dance that. And then a few years later.
I'm going to do some Google searching. I'm going to
Yeah.
find that.
Okay, wait, Nicole, we have not had a conversation about lambada before, because I'm kind of a pro lambada dancer. In case you didn't know. So next time I see you, it's like, because it's kind of like, if you know how to dance salsa, it's pretty easy transition to lambada.
Yeah, and it's just such a joyful dance. I love tango, but what's always fun about Argentina versus Brazil is like the words to the tango is always, you know, some dramatic thing like, oh, I love you, but you love him, so I hate him, but I love him because he's my brother, so I'm gonna kill you and I'm gonna kill him, but first I'm gonna kill myself, right?
No, that sounds exactly like a tango. Like you got it down, Nicole. That's exactly it.
You go across the border. No one can ever explain this. It's like Switzerland versus Italy, like these little borders and everything changes, right? And in Brazil, the words to these songs are always like, oh, you're cute, I'm cute, let's go make love under that coconut tree. It's just so funny. It's just a different mindset. But I have to say, I love both cultures so much. And Argentina is so sophisticated. Of course, it has the highest per capita of shrinks in the world, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
right?
It does. There are more psychologists in
more
Argentina.
than in LA, right? Can you believe that?
No, and actually, I recommend this to people, you know, like if you want to have a really good psychologist with a lot of experience and pay less, get one in Argentina, and you can pay them on like PayPal or something.
That's a great idea.
And they would be very happy because dollars are worth a lot in Argentina.
Yeah, personal trainers too. I heard that's quite a thing.
Yeah, there's great personal trainers in Argentina. Yeah.
What's this photo about? Because there's a lady in a blue dress and you with your gray, and then me with red hair, maybe.
Yeah, so that's our winemaker Alejandro Vigil with red hair. So we're having a conversation about the journey to the land of Malbec, and we're like pretending we're on a TV show. So what the book was kind of like telling our adventures in time. So we actually go back to the Middle Ages, and you know, I pretend I'm talking to Eleanor of Aquitaine about Malbec, because Malbec exists actually since the Roman times. And so we and then Alejandro and I write each other, like, you know, he's like some kind of a vineyard producer, you know, from the 19th century, and I'm, you know, writing like as like a woman in Spain. And so it's like the whole book is like this kind of fantasy connection between us, like pretending that we're going back in time, and then like it comes back to reality where we're actually going through the Uco Valley. And so this is the intro to when we start going to the today's wine regions of Malbec. It's pretty like the concept of the book is a little bit weird, but actually the book is really fun to read. I think that's why it did
pure
well.
genius. Honestly, I am so impressed with everything that you're doing in that area, and the fact that you can fly the flag for Malbec, and I'm sure that there are producers in Argentina who are jealous of any kind of credit that you get for all that hard work that you do, because that's often what happens. I have to say, I think it's been one of the most exciting things to watch how you communicate about these things and how you help educate people about the bigger picture, not just, you know, your wines and all
Like
of that.
Nicole,
I think
I
it's so
would
important.
everything you just said about me, I repeat about you. Like the way you, I mean, and the thing is, listen, I was born into a wine family, you know, that was already well known when I started. You created everything, and you know, you've created this paradise that everybody's talking about, and that is so prominent for your region when, like, nobody even knew your region. So you're actually much more of a genius than I am because you've done
Well,
it in
you're
a
very
much
kind,
shorter
but
time.
I have the good luck that we're in a region that has quite a bit of established history, certainly towards Chateauneuf. But one of the things you said about that old world, new world paradigm is so true. I think not only the consumers, but even the trade and the press is stuck in a mindset that just doesn't fit reality anymore. If you think about it, all these definitions, new world, old world, just like you said, what do you mean new world? When
Yeah.
people say that, they think of Argentina, California, New Zealand, Australia. But wait a minute, the oldest Grenache vines are in Australia.
Yeah.
You've just said, you know, 5 years, centuries of history of winemaking where you are, etc. And so what's happened is people confuse wine culture and commercial success and all of that stuff, or commercial prominence. And one of the most interesting things I've tried to do is deconstruct that into different areas. So that for me is what I call the old new world, right? Now you have what I'd call the new world, which is Thailand and China and India and countries where they certainly haven't been making or planting a lot of vines in a long time, or in some cases ever. And then you have what we often refer to as the old world, which is of course Spain, Italy, Germany, you know, and of course France, number one, when people think of that lineup. But and let's call those guys for a moment the old world. But actually, as soon as you scratch the surface, there's all these other countries that were the birthland of wine civilization that fell off the map commercially for all sorts of reasons, and now they're back, right? Whether it's Georgia or you know, Greece, Macedonia, etc. And are those old world? Are they new world? I call them the new old world. And for a consumer, poor thing, they're trying to find their way around that maze. If you're a producer in Macedonia, what do? Do you try to plant only indigenous varieties? Do you try to go with something that, you know, that sometimes that can be quite difficult or unpronounceable for someone, so you go for something more classic? You know, how do you navigate that, and how does the consumer navigate that world? And then you look at France, right, where we are, old world tradition, right? You think France, you think all that, the weight of all that know-how and tradition. But actually, look at the Ventoux, right? This emerging region that's come out of nowhere because as biodiversity becomes so important and cooler climates like you have in Argentina and we have in the whole Ventoux area, suddenly being the name of the game, where everybody is scouring the globe to find places that have the altitude, that have the biodiversity. And we're kind of the new France, and is that old world? Is that new world? It's very exciting, and it helps to break down the preconceived notions that people have about where their wine comes from and why it was made that way.
In the glass right now, we have the Shen Blue 2021, which is 60 Grenache, 15 Syrah, 12% Roll, which is known as Vermentino in Italy, and a big blending variety in Provence as well, and one of the Rhone varieties, and some Mourvèdre and Cinsault. And
Yes.
we are in the Rhone Valley. We are looking at the little appellation known as, I'm going to find it here, Ventoux, and you are up here, I believe, right?
Yeah, we're right on the border of 4 appellations there, where you see that whole Gigondas, Ventoux, Baume de Venise, all that. And it's crazy because it's deceptive, right? You want to bang on about appellation, but actually, if you don't take the third dimension into consideration when you set up your appellation maps, you're completely invalidating the logic that makes you try to find a commonality of style or quality. So up at the top of the mountain where we are, you have, it's where the four corners connect, and that's quite a different environment to be making wine in, but that's never reflected in these maps.
Well, if we talk right over the top of this video, or should we let the music play?
No, I mean, this is definitely an area that kind of shows the altitude. If you look at the backdrop there, we're actually between 550 and 630 meters, which I guess for you guys is about 1,800 feet. And you can really see the drop down to that valley, which is about 600 feet. So everything changes, right? We have snow and the other guys have rain. We harvest in October instead of September. And I know that that's very similar to what's happening at Catena, right?
Yeah, no, we are, I mean, people always think of, you know, Argentina has got to be warm because it's South America, but actually as you go up in altitude, you've got Burgundian Champagne climate. And I think you've got the same situation. People think south of France has got to be warm, but actually it's cool. So yeah, you're right. We have some parallels there.
Yeah, what's exciting, of course, is that as winemakers, you feel like you won the lottery because you have the best of both worlds, right? You feel like you have all the sunshine and concentration as much as the guys down in the valley, right? We have as many days of sun as Chateauneuf, for example, which is right on the same latitude. But you also have the elegance and not just the opulence, because that cool climate is giving you the restraint and the elegance that is very hard to get in a very hot climate. So it's really a wonderfully exciting way to get around that paradigm of either or. And I think that's why so many people are looking for high altitude. And that's even before all this global warming started to really punch us in the nose. But boy, is that becoming an urgent thing right now.
Wow, both these wines are so fantastic. This rosé is blowing my mind because I'm actually working on a rosé project right now and talking about different rosés of the world, and this just is so elevated. Aromatics are beautiful, and there's wonderful mouth palate weight and balance, and it really smelling and tasting fantastic, Nicole.
Well, I'm so happy to hear that, because we did spend like 6 years deconstructing the aromatic curve on rosé to try to rebuild it, to try to really isolate, zero in on the potholes, right? What would be a typical aromatic curve on a rosé, right? It would be beautiful first impression, and then flat lines, no mid palate, no complexity, etc., no follow through, no caudalie, and then you get that little bitter finish at the end many times, which is often coming from the PVPP, the polyvinyl polypropylene that people use to do the fining of it. And so how do you keep that first part instead of the soap bubble? Oh, that's so pretty. Poof, it's gone, right? How do you really build the chunkiness in the mid palate? How do you get it to hold its concentration and its high notes all the way through for several, I don't know, somewhere between 30 seconds and a minute. It's just like a soprano that kind of keeps the note, and that's really hard to do on rosé. I think also not having any of the chemicals in the vineyard or in the winery really helps, because we don't use tartric acid because the altitude is enough to give us the natural acidity, and on a hot year we'll bump up the quantity of the vermentino, the roll, and this was a difficult vintage. This is our new winemaker who was stuck with one of the harder vintages on record in many ways, and we really struggled to pull the rosé together, and we're so happy with how it came out. So I'm really glad it worked. It was, I think if you're working with good raw material and you're not adding any of the artifice, you're already ahead of the game.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope that comes through.
Well, in a world where there's a lot of rosé, this is going to stand out to a lot of you. And
I just want to tell you guys that I got from Nicole for the holidays, like a bottle of this wine in Magnum, and I just when I got it, I said, I have to save it for a really special occasion. And then like 3 years later, I had it when I had like some friends and family at the house, and people went crazy. And it already had like 3 years, from it was like a slightly older rosé. And it was like even better than the young rosés. Like also like this wine ages well. And and that is literally I can't think of any better gift I've ever gotten for the holidays than the surprise bottle of Chêne Bleu that I got from Nicole. It was amazing. Yes, I
Well,
love this
from your
wine.
lips to Santa's ears.
I mean, yeah, Santa was so good to me that year. No, it was like 2 years before COVID. So maybe it was 5 years ago. I don't remember anymore.
Yeah, aged rosé, if it's built to last, it can really be so exciting because it just keeps the charm and beauty and the sort of flirtatiousness, but it also gets the gravitas and some interesting notes that you would never associate with rosé. So I'm all for rosés that age, and I'm also really big on the food wines, the rosés that are really gastronomic and can open up all sorts of exciting pairing possibilities. But for that, you really need the glycerol and you need the texture, and it really helps that we make it with old vines and that they have those very thick skins packed with phenolics, and they have the sticky texture that really helps to give it the kind of bite that will be good with food. So I'm guessing in particular in California, with the famous California lifestyle and the kind of way of eating that people have out there, I think it's particularly well suited for the California climates.
For sure. Well, both of you have such a wealth of information. So just thinking, as the host of the show, where we could go. I know that there's a lot in common with your farming methods. And I just wanted to see if you had anything interesting to talk about with regards to, because there is such the pendulum has really swung. We used to talk a little bit about how things are grown, and now we're almost leading with this information because it's so important to our wine buyers and to people that are interested more in the preservation of earth. How are these wines grown? And you both have achieved some very high level of vineyard management, sustainability, regenerative practices, and biodynamics and organics. Why don't each of you take a couple of moments and just talk about something that's important to you? And Laura, I'll start with you.
Can I say that I'd like Laura, if she doesn't mind, to at least talk a little bit about her institute, because I just think that's absolutely fantastic what she's doing with that. And I hope you'll mention a little bit about it as well for everybody.
Great.
Absolutely. Thank you, Nicole. Yeah, so the Catena Institute, I founded in 1995, and the vision is to use science to preserve nature and culture. And, to me, I don't know, there's always been threats to farming, but they have accelerated with climate change. But I don't think often people who drink wine realize how many threats there are, from water shortage to heat. I mean, heat in some ways to me is one of the lesser problems, because at least you could solve it by planting different varieties. But, water is a really big issue. Losing the diversity of vines available, that, when you talk about old world, new world, I always say Argentina is the old world for Malbec, because the genetic diversity of Malbec no longer exists in Europe, and we have it in Argentina. So I think there is so much thought that has to go into preserving a vineyard, preserving an old vineyard, preserving Massal selections. And this is not something that can be an afterthought. You have to think about it. You have to research it, because, like, for example, we did a research trial on water treatments, and we tried like less water, more water, all the different things, predicting the future. And we actually found out that the best treatment was what we did, following the traditions of the native peoples of Mendoza, who used to water using more of like cultural practices, looking at the skies, looking at the other plants. When you get the ants, that means you need to water, like the ants coming out. So like all these practices that have more to do with cultural practices than anything scientific. But that was scientific. because we actually did the research and we realized that what we needed to do was follow the artisanal way. And that would be better for the environment and for the quality. So I founded the Institute with the idea of actually doing all this research so that we could preserve not just our region as a winemaking region, but also the culture, because that's something that also people don't realize. A lot of the young people want to leave the countryside. There's a lot of wine regions where you have, migrant workers coming to farm, which is also, a way of life to be a migrant farmer. And that's, humanity has always functioned like that, with people, going from place to farm. But you also need local people that are farming. And in many countries, there's no more local people want to farm. So you have to study, like, why would people want to leave this idyllic place? You know why? Because maybe they don't have internet. And as a producer, you always want to say, oh, you should be happy because I painted your house, or you should be happy because I paid you well. You need to actually ask people, what do they want? And we actually did this survey to figure out, how could we get people to live in these remote areas and be happy and want to bring up a family there? And we realized that the most important factor was good internet. Like, yes, of course, they also have a nice house and they have electricity, and we give them a car, and and schools, because if they have good internet, their kids can get a good education. So what the Institute does is really, with this vision in mind, we do all the research. And when it comes to biodynamics and organics and all this, which Nicole is a world expert in biodynamics, I actually did a lot of study of organic, biodynamic. Sustainable is basically putting it all together so that there's also like looking at electricity, looking at the finances. So most people who farm biodynamic, they are also farming sustainably, because they're also thinking of how do I provoke less carbon emissions. It's not all about making a wine that has no pesticides, like, what's my contribution to the world? But what I realized was that biodynamics, somebody had come up with it in Austria in the early 19th century. And why would I be applying these concoctions that this person came up with in Austria, who had probably never, I don't think Steiner ever came to Argentina, to my knowledge. And why would I apply this when I have these traditions that were created first by the native peoples, who we wouldn't have farming in Mendoza if it weren't for these canals that they built so that the glacier waters could be used in Mendoza. And then we had these immigrant Italians and Spaniards who kind of joined their practices with the practices that were native to our region, and created this farming way of Mendoza. So I created a name for, instead of biodynamics, we use catenamics. So it's catena, my name, with amics. And the reason, and initially it was kind of a joke. Like, I was like, it's our way, but our way is we study something and then we change it only if it needs to be changed. And you and I were, sort of sending emails about the fact that some organic practices are actually bad for the environment, because when you do organic farming, you need a lot of machinery to be cutting grass. And so and that uses a lot of diesel or gasoline. So we are now researching what are the best cover crops so that we don't have to use a lot of tractors, and so that we don't have to cut the grass a lot. And some of them are native, some of them are not native. This is a lot of work. Figuring out the best way to farm that's good for health of the people drinking the wine and also good for the environment is not easy. And we also collaborate with the Institute collaborates with research institutes in France and the US, UC Davis. We collaborate with Australia. I mean, a lot of different people come to us for hey, will you do my part of, for example, we're doing for University of Burgundy, the Pinot Noir and Chardonnay part of their study, because they want to look at Chardonnay and Pinot Noir all over the world. And I think international collaboration is so necessary for us to find a solution, but the solution has to be local. You need to think big, learn from others, but then you're going to need a local solution, because the climate and the problems of your country are going to be different than the problems in other places.
For sure.
Couldn't agree more with that. That's such a characteristic of the world of wine, which is this global thing, right? It's so global and it's so local. And it's such a tension between what's commonly practiced in your region, your traditions, and how much you can learn from that, versus people who are like-minded across the world who have similar practices, because there's been such a reorganization. The wine world still thinks very regionally, but in fact, when you look carefully, your mindset and your challenges and your solutions might have much more in common with somebody on the exact other side of the world who has the same desire for perfection or challenges to make, very commercial wine that's affordable on a supermarket shelf and is buying their oak chips at the same guy in Sweden who sells them at, better price and all that. Or maybe you're a natural wine person, and then it's all about what the other natural wine people are doing, and it's so different than it used to be, because with the acceleration of technology, the transfer of people, ideas, and know-how that's so much faster, you'll find that the same subset of people in each of these different categories of winemaking are going to know each other and work in each other's cellars, etc., rather than in the cellar of the person down the road to do their apprenticeship the way it would have been a few, maybe 10, 15 years ago. So actually, so many people are still locked into that way of thinking. And it goes back to what you said about biodynamic, organic, regenerative, sustainable. We're certified organic, sustainable, bee friendly, and we've done a lot of looking into the pros and cons of all these things, and we realize that so many consumers are lost or confused. They either don't care as much as they should, or they care about things that are not the things that they should be caring about. And they go on and on about sulfites, when in fact it would be great if they knew that was the least of their concerns compared to what a lot of people are using in their wineries,
Right.
etc. So there's a lot of disinformation, and at the end, going full circle on all of that, I'd come back exactly to where you are, which is to say, you have to make a roadmap yourself that's a mix and match. It's like IKEA, with moving. So I have IKEA on my brain, but you have the general framework, and then you're deciding whether you want the shelves or the cabinets or whatever. It's very much about taking big principles and then adapting them to the specifics of your situation. And anything prescriptive, I feel quite queasy about in the natural worlds, because nature doesn't work that way. It doesn't want to fit into those neat little boxes that we try to fit it into. And so we have to make, the same old stuff in a different sauce, because it's not going to work for everybody. So I'm very much like you. I'm in a region that I'm lucky doesn't have the same pressure of disease that some other rainier areas have. So we have choices and options to make wine without using certain other products that other people wouldn't have that option. So who am I to judge what they do or how they do it? They have their reasons for making wine the way they do. So it's just about finding the solutions for you. And that's taken us a good 25 years now, because commercially we've only been around for about 12 years, but we have been watching the vineyard, studying it, working with Claude Emilia Bourguignon, and making inventories of all the microorganisms. It's like a Jurassic Park of microorganisms there, because it didn't have the 20 years of terrible pesticide abuse that some of the region suffered, or the winemaking in France has had a very harsh bout of that, and is luckily emerging from that terrible period in its history. So I think we're in a lucky position there, but what works for us is not what works for someone else. We're in the heart of a UNESCO biosphere where there's 1,400 species just of butterflies. We count our little rabbits and hares. There's my sweet little rabbits that are hiding in the label as well. In fact, on that rosé label, I think if you know Chênebreux, you probably know that there are 5 little white rabbits that are hiding all around there, because they're halfway in the food chain between the predators and the microorganisms. And so it's a very good way to see, there you go. I challenge anyone to see them in that version. You'll just have to buy a bottle and look for them. But the rosé, Yes, well, the rosé is one of the only cuvées that actually has 6 rabbits,
Ah,
because for our 10th anniversary, I added a 6th little hidden rabbit there. And I also created that think tank, the Fine Minds for Fine Wines, which is now part of the Iranian Global Institute for the Future of Fine Wine. And I really hope that the wine world can have more and more of these forums and these ways to connect. The World Living Forum, Living Soils Forum that Moet Hennessy put together, the work that the institute that Lara created can be shared. I just think we have to create like that, the famous network of PCs where you have everybody benefiting from the research that the others are doing,
mhm.
instead of what's currently happening so much. Everybody with their little nose on their little plot trying to figure out global warming and how it's going to affect their vines. That's nuts. The Columbia Earth Institute is doing really great work globally on being able to help farmers anticipate what's going to be happening when and how in ways that was never possible in the past. There's really important stuff happening, and it feels like a rudderless ship many times. And I think that it's really thanks to people like Laura who have both the research and the company notoriety and the personal notoriety to be in this fantastic position to spread the word and to connect people. So I'm really, I think really that doesn't always get talked about enough, in my opinion. You know, many people celebrate Catena wines and how great they taste and how important they are for Malbec and for the reputation of Argentina. And then people know Laura personally and love and appreciate her. But I think the work that she's doing on a broader scale, bringing her science background and bringing her sort of global mindset to bear, and her cultural fluency and geographic fluidity, I think is so essential. I think that's really something that we should be cloning, not just our vines.
Wow,
Oh
you
my
really
God, Nicole, like I'm almost getting teary-eyed.
you
It's
opened
true.
up.
It's so
I think you
so
should come
important.
to when I get buried, to my wake. I will tell. I
No.
will ask my husband to invite you.
Nicole, you opened
Let's
up a
not
really
talk
interesting
about it,
window. You
please.
opened up a really interesting window because I think every world issue, I just went to a massive cancer uh, charity fundraiser. The Milken Institute was here in Los Angeles, and they spent a huge amount of time talking about, with the pandemic and everything else, how all these independent organizations were having a hard time pulling their information together. And really what they did at Milken Institute is collect information and shared it with everybody. And that was their big contribution to the pandemic. And then you're talking about how, everyone's trying to figure out how global warming's impacting their unique spot, and yet there needs to be some sharing of information around the world and different connectivities and stuff like that. And that's a really fascinating parallel. All issues need a great conduit of information to be able to share results and challenges and opportunities, and that's fascinating.
What's
Uh,
interesting is something that just happened that I have to say I was delighted about, that I'd love to share with you because it's about to hit our screens. So when we hosted the first Fine Minds for Fine Wines in 2017, which again was to celebrate our 10th anniversary.
Wait, Nicole, tell to everybody about fine minds for fine wines, because this is Nicole's baby, and this is a think tank that is incredible. So wait, give the brief, explain it so that
Well, we
everybody
were
knows.
just trying to think here we are 10 years into our adventure. It's been rock and roll, so challenging and so gratifying, so terrifying, all of the above. And we were figuring out, okay, where do we want to be 10 years from now? What's the right way to sort of mark this milestone? And some people have big parties, and that's wonderful. And there's all sorts of different ways to skin that cat. But we thought, well, let's combine two things. First of all, Chambly is really a small production, but it tends to be sort of the thinking person's wine, right? It's not obvious. It's not, broempunk, right? You don't just go into a wine shop and say, give me a Napa cab, right? It's something more for insiders, or for people who like to go behind labels and know why and how and all that stuff. And so we were thinking, okay, we've accomplished a bunch of stuff that we set out to do. There are a lot of things that we are still trying to figure out, but where do we want to set our sights for 10 years from now? What address do you want to put in the GPS to be relevant and make it make sense, right? Because you can play your greatest hits, you can continue to be very experimental, you can do a mix, etc. Well, to know that, you need to know, where is the world going? What's the future of geopolitics, of tech, of luxury, of gastronomy, of ecology, all the big levers that are specific to the fine wine world, because some of the stuff that happens to fine wine is the same as wine, right? If the regulators wake up tomorrow, which some of them are thinking of doing, and say, all wine is bad for you because 3 people in 100 can't handle their alcohol, therefore now you're going to have to put a cirrhosis liver on the back of your label like cigarettes, and it's game over for everyone, because we have to protect those 3 consumers who don't know how to manage how much they drink, right? So in some ways you're directly affected by wine, the generic experience of wine, but in other ways you have levers to these other worlds. So I thought, let's get some of the top thinkers together from all those areas and try to figure out where the wine is going, because that's well above my pay grade. And in a nutshell, it was very exciting to see what came out of it. But the purpose of this anecdote was that, apart from spawning the Irani Global Institute for the Future of Fine Wine, which I co-founded with the amazing Pauline Vicard, it led to a casual conversation at the gala dinner between Jancis Robinson and Andrew Caillard, the master of wine who's based in Australia, and who had made that movie Red Obsession, which you may have seen or heard about.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great movie about wine in China.
Wine in China. And so Jancis asked Andrew if he had any more movie projects. And he said, oh, it was so much work, so much money, such stress. I wouldn't make another movie unless I had a really, really good story. So Jancis said, oh, I know just the story. There's a team of sommeliers from Zimbabwe going to the World Wine Competition in France for the first time. And this is very exciting, momentous event for Zimbabwe, for the wine world. And there were some chuckles, about the references to the Jamaican bobsledding team, etc. And the backstory of all of that was fascinating, which I just found out. I just came back from our think tank in South Africa about 10 days ago. And what I found out is that from that conversation, he got very excited, quickly organized the filming part, and they just launching the premiere of the movie that's come of it, called Blind Ambition. And it's an amazing.
When is that happening?
It's just rolling out. It's just coming to some of the film festivals. Wow. Blind Ambition. And I went to the preview in South Africa, and the launch was this Thursday, I think. So yeah, and extremely well received, of course, in South Africa, because these are Zimbabwean refugees that came with nothing when their country fell apart, lived in horrible refugee camps until one by one they found their way into restaurants, etc. And several of them came up through the ranks and helped each other get into these restaurants. And then one of them became very interested in wine, and somebody, their famous French sommelier, took him under his wing and started coaching him, etc. He fell in love with wine, brought his buddies on board. They set up little tasting sessions, and he was able to compete with South Africa the first year. But then he got his Zimbabwean sommeliers were so excited that then they couldn't have 4 sommeliers from Zimbabwe on the South African team. They decided to set up their own team and flag, wave the Zimbabwean flag. It's just such a good feel-good story. I won't tell you how it ends, but I will say it's a happy ending. So
I
it's not an
almost
ending. It's the adventure is unfolding, and it was very wonderful to meet them all. They're just an absolutely delightful group of human beings, on top of being very talented blind tasters.
wait, were you able to meet them in South Africa?
Yes, they came to
Oh,
the
that's
think tank. Yes,
wonderful. Oh my
yes,
God,
it was
that's
great, as well as the sommelier who coached them.
I'm so sad that I missed that trip, but I'll go next time.
Please do.
I
It's going to
really
be in
couldn't go this
California, so
year.
you have no
That would be
excuse.
easier. That would be easier, yes.
It's
I'll
next
definitely be
June.
looking for it. Yeah,
You betcha.
Blind Ambitions.
Blind Ambition. Amazing. It's just, don't miss it.
Cool. With the time we have remaining, can we share a fun travel story that we've had in wine or maybe wine tourism? I think the greatest part of the wine world is how it interconnects us, our passion. We take it to another place and we discover, a new grape or a new town or some old history, and we traveling with great people, people we care about, or traveling alone. I actually had one of my greatest trips ever by myself down in Sevilla in southern Spain. And what do you have a great travel story and wine tourism story? Nicole, we'll start with you.
Well, I was thinking back to when Shen Bleu was just a little apple in our eye, and my mother, who had been a film critic and a journalist, a film critic, a food critic, a formidable woman, very impressive. And by the time she retired to Santa Barbara, she was a bit plumpy and looking like a lot of these little old ladies that you see classically in that part of California. And it was really interesting because she checked out the whole food and wine scene as soon as she arrived. And she was often treated so badly, a bit like in that movie Tootsie, where people would completely dismiss her, and the tasting room managers would put out pull out the $2 chuck or whatever they had, and so she would say nothing, and she'd just observe everything and make these little wine maps for me when I would come and visit her out there in her golden years. And then she'd take me on her secret tours of her favorite people and her favorite wines and favorite places. So one time she was particularly impressed with Andrew Murray, and she also really liked the Doug Marjoram at the wine cask, and also Marjoram wines, of course. And she took me around to meet them, and they were really, really nice to me when other people had treated her very badly, and she just didn't take me there at all. And so I hit it off with them, etc. And then when we made our own wine for the first time, it was very wonderful to invite them to come make wine with us. And Andrew helped us with our first vintage, and Doug and I made some cuvées together. And it's just been, I just loved the way that happened, because they showed their true colors to this little old lady. They treated her with respect. They showed her the good stuff. They spoke to her. They didn't talk down to her. And I think it's very important when you have so many people coming through a tasting room and you have to make quick decisions about who you're going to spend your time on, that they both gave her the benefit of the doubt. And I thought that was something that I tried, to keep in mind as well. When we receive people, you just never know who really knows and who really cares about the work that you're doing.
That's what I love about the wine world. It's so small, and we all know each other in that way. Doug Marjoram has done so much for us in the many years and events. And when we went into pandemic, pivot here and started doing Zooms, Andrew Murray was one of our first Zoom guests. And it's just such a really cool thing that the separation between us all is so small. It's super cool.
Yeah, and now you know that they're really good guys even when they're off camera.
Oh, I'm sure. How about you, Laura? Any great?
So, well, I have so many, but I will tell you of one story, and it's actually, there's a picture in my book. So this book has like some good photography, but also some Polaroid type. This is a photo I took at the bridge of Cahors. So Cahors is the birthplace of Malbec, and it's in southern France. And I went on this journey when I was writing the book um, to um, to see Cahors, and so much came up from that. I went to this Malbec History Center, and I met this professor who happened to be there. Like, this guy was at this Malbec tasting room once a year. It happened to be the same day when I came to this town. And I did this incredible Malbec tasting and talked to this professor who gave me a lot of the references that I was able to use for my book on Malbec, which are not that easy to find. Like, from a particular volume of the Encyclopedia Britannica from the late 19th century, from the Encyclopédie Française, like, this one page has the whole history of Malbec. And so I went to that town, met these people at this tasting center. And at first I didn't self-identify as Laura Catena from Malbec land in Argentina, and they were amazing. And then I finally was like, well, I'm Laura Catena. And they're like, oh my God. And they're like, here's the professor. And it was just the most amazing interaction. But they were nice before they knew that I was a producer in Argentina. And then based also on this story came part of the inspiration for a label we have called Malbec Argentino, that is the only label in the world that tells the history of a wine variety. And it goes from Eleanor of Aquitaine, who used to drink Malbec at her wedding, to, you know, phylloxera is actually one of the women on the label.
It's pure genius.
And this bridge, though, that is in the label as well, because when I saw it, I thought this medieval bridge is such a big part. And then we also do a play. And this is, I know that Nicole at her winery, they have this festival where they have theater. But when we have some of our customers like you, Ian, who come down to Argentina, we do a theater play. And actually in the book, the illustrator did a drawing of me playing phylloxera, the plague. And we do this play. We do this play where our customers actually act the characters, the Eleanor of Aquitaine, the immigrant, phylloxera, and then they have to act a female in the Catena family, who's usually my sister. And we have the script for the play. When people arrive, and like when I told my father about this, he said, nobody's going to do that. That's crazy. They're going to feel ridiculous. No, everybody loves doing it. In fact, the best actors, I think, are the men playing women, because you get a few drinks in them, they put a wig, they do their best British accent, and they are just the best queen there ever was. So
that's hilarious.
Anyhow, and I know my sister has been to Nicole's celebrations, and they are her favorite wine experiences ever are the two times she's gone to Nicole's celebrations at her winery. So I really second what Nicole says about, like, really go all out, do different things. We're not doing musing and wine pairings, like, do different things, but also, like, really love every person. Like, you know, I always tell my staff at the winery, I'm like, beware Texas billionaires in shorts and flip-flops. You know, like every person is a great person. Doesn't matter what they're dressed as or what they look like. They are the most important customer. And don't judge people for, you know, anything, you know, what they look like, you know, because there's, I don't know, there's a lot of people who buy a lot of wine who are really good customers who come in camouflage to wine tastings.
Sure.
That's really funny. And Adriana is an absolute delight. And
that's my
thank you
sister.
for putting us in touch with her, because she's just a ray of sunshine, and she's a huge fan of yours, and that says so much, because oftentimes sisters, especially close in age, it's not an easy
well, we are not close in age. She is my much younger sister. That's why.
Well, you must be drinking a lot of your own wine, because I wouldn't have known that. But anyway, she's a delight, and I don't know what that Nicolas put in your breakfast cereals, but I think you should package and sell that alongside your wonderful wines, and do very well, because what a remarkable family. I have to say that you also, the fact that you combine that your interest in science, and then, as you said, the acting and the connect the dots part. I think one of the things we deal with a lot at our wine school at the extreme wine experience, which is what Laura and her sister have spoken at often as the guests of honor, etc. Is that if you try to learn about wine in coming up through the ranks and just trying to get a more and more sophisticated understanding of it, you will succeed, but it could take some time. I find that with a lot of wine consumers, it's much easier to help them accede to the more complex and sophisticated aspects of fine wine coming laterally through other areas of thought where they might already have quite sophisticated understanding and thinking. So and you can use the arts, you can make parallels with music, with painting, with theater. In fact, if you have any idea what Plato and Shakespeare have in common, I'd be very interested to hear your guesses, because in a couple of days, you're going to have both of those things happening in our Chêne Bleu universe. And I won't tell you what the connection between the two is. You have to guess. But if you want to know, I'll tell you. Watch that space. It's actually not what you think.
Okay. I was going to start Googling it to see if this is public knowledge. Is it something?
I am sure it's not. Hey guys, I actually have another meeting that I have to go to.
Yeah.
Are we good, Ian?
Yeah, what do you want to tell us what Shakespeare and Plato have in common, and then we can.
You would never guess. It's a trick
Say
question.
it, because if she says it, then your customers will guess before other people, right? No.
It's because we care a lot about. We love employing people who have a multiplicity of interests and abilities, and then in this case, so our son is acting in Phaedo, which is of course a Platonic dialogues, and we're doing a lovely Chêne Bleu event around that. And in parallel of Nirja Nayak, who's a wonderful young woman who helps us with our finances, she's graduating in economics, and she's a well-known actress, and she's going to be in 12th Night in Kew Gardens at the same time, and we're also doing a Chêne Bleu event around that. So we're going to be heavily invested in making some interesting connections between those two titans and the enjoyable experiences of fine wine. And I'll tell you more.
So that what they have in
iteration.
common is that they're both being performed at Chêne Bleu.
There you go.
There you go.
I told you it was a trick question.
Can people find out about the plays on your website, Nicole?
I'll give you the information, yes.
Okay. Well, it's been a joy to spend this morning with you both and to continue the relationship. And I wish both of you an amazing summer and upcoming harvest. And we hope to cross paths many times over the years to come. So thank you both.
Ian, hats off to you for thinking outside the box and giving me the great pleasure of connecting with Laura. It's not easy on both sides of the world with all the stuff going on to find the time to spend with her, and every minute I've ever spent with her has been great.
When I saw it said Nicole, I was like, okay, yes. What's the date? I say yes. You made it easy, Ian. So
Ian, you're a genius, and thank you for doing your part to deconstruct and rebuild your version of interesting things where 1 + 1 = 3, just like we're trying to do with our little fermentations. So thank you.
Great. Okay.
My pleasure, guys. Have a beautiful day.
Bye. Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Love you. Bye.
Love you. Yay.
See you both.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.